Hello, everybody. We have a couple of people joining in, so we're going mostly back to back here. We are going to be squeezing in, but we have quite some interesting panel today with me to exchange a bit on the education segment. And as I mentioned before, this is an area of development for strategy too that maybe was something that we were not focusing, but today we're seeing it is actually one of the driving forces that we have. And when we talk about education, we also talk about corporate training. And this is the different angle that we're going to bring you. So I'm going to introduce our co-host today. So today I'm happy to introduce you to three good friends of mine, personally, of strategy tools that have been working quite some time again on the educational part. I will start with the top left on my screen. So I will introduce you first with Professor Antonella Martini from the University of Pisa. Good morning, Professor.
Good afternoon to all of you. And it's a real pleasure to be here at the Strategy Tool Partner Summit.
Thank you, thank you. So with Antonella, we've been working what kind of 12 to 18 months, more or less, but she's been a partner of strategy tool since longer, and she's using the strategy tool canvas in her teaching. And we recently also add the simulation part, so she can give us a light on that kind of journey that she's delivering. Second is Javier Sevilla from Mexico. And Javier had been recently appointed adjunct professor for the Northeastern. So hello, Javier.
Hi, Enrico, and hi, everybody. Really happy to be here. And actually, I think that I'm here because I just heard that somebody was bringing some tequila. So it's a really nice time. Let's see.
And it's good, education and tequila. That's what we want to hear. And the third person that I want to introduce today is Greg Dobrucki from Poland. So Greg has been a long-term, again, partner of strategy tools. He will bring us more the corporate training on top of his facilitation that he's been doing for a lot of program in the education part. So hello, Greg, and welcome.
Hello, hello, good afternoon. I'm saying hello from the middle of the coast of the Baltic Sea, the northern coast of Poland. So I'm not sure if you can hear me well because the coverage is today very bad. So fingers crossed that for at least for 1 hour, it will be okay. I'm happy to share my experiences with the corporate learning.
Great. So we're hearing you well, Greg, and thanks for joining us from holiday. I think this is the disclaimer for the wife and the family that you are renegating to be here with us today. So let's move close to this point. So we have three major areas that we're going to discuss in this educational panel, linked to most of the journey when we work in this area. And all this part has been collected by our community. So we took their point of view and we expose now to this part. So the first question that I have is related to what we need to do before introducing strategy tool and the solution and the simulation in the education world. So there are two areas here. What is the kind of procurement process in terms of the buyer and the decision maker in the different education part? And also, what are the critical success factors to position strategy tools and the solution and the simulation in education? And either you choose, the three of you want to start, either I can point out, or either we stay with the same order that we did before, starting with Professor Martini.
Okay, thank you. I have a brief note because it's harder for me to go longer and to forget any points I would like to share with you today. So I would like to start with telling you how I approach the strategy tools, and then I get the key factors. Well, about 5-6 years ago, I started thinking about a new course on strategy at the master level. I mean, graduate level for management, engineering, and data science students. So in STEAM faculty, not a business school. What's the difference between them? I mean, a STEAM faculty respect to a business school? Well, I think the approach is different because in a STEAM faculty, there are real problems, tools, methods. I mean, the how to deal with and how to solve a problem. The how to deal with and how to solve a problem are key for teaching and learning. While in a business school, especially at undergraduate level, usually, not always, of course, a course is more theoretically based, not problem-centered or practically focused. So the risk is to know the theory or to solve other business school case studies, but reality is different. So here the focus is more on what and why, especially from books. So I was thinking of a new course in terms of content and teaching and learning approach. I was searching an integrated approach, the why and the how, in a real project team-based learning context. And in my search, I came across some fields: future and foresights, competitive intelligence, visual thinking, and so on. And these fields were quite independent in each other. So different communities, no contaminations. And in this context, I found communities such as Academy of Competitive Intelligence, strategic and competitive intelligence professionals, World Future Studies Federations, and of course, strategy tools. And I realized that these fields were using different languages, but addressed quite the same problems. I was intrigued by strategy tools and realized soon that I needed to go deeper into their logics to understand if and how to integrate them with the new content. So I registered for the Global Coach program 3 years ago. It was not free at that time. Now it is free. In such a way, I had a clear idea of how I could integrate the tools in the new course, which tools to be chosen, what real cases I could use as examples in the class. The following year, I contacted Enrico to propose him a 4-hour seminar in my class. Therefore, in that moment, I already known strategy tools and could place the seminar properly. So what are the key factors in my experience, of course? 2 points. First of all, in my opinion, it is important to define the educational context. I mean, graduate level or executive level. These contexts are different respect to the experience of the students. At executive level, students have work experiences, and it's easier for them to apply the tools in their real context. Although they have more rigidities or biases, they are used to working in teams, while graduate students may not. So students' needs are partially different. The second aspect refers to budget. MBA, executive education, have budgets to be used for teaching purpose, which come from the fees while a teacher at graduate level may not have a budget for teaching purpose. So willingness to pay is quite different for these two contexts. But I think it is not a or problem. Instead, it's a both and one. Both levels, in my opinion, are interesting to enter to. Executive education is interesting for margins, but graduate level is not so interesting for margin, but for the fact that many institutions have both levels, graduate and executive education, and to enter the graduate may facilitate entering the executive level. For example, this year I invited Enrico in our executive master class, just because I test personally the approach and content. And the second point, it is important to have both level, graduate and executive, for having an impact on the society. So it's a question of purpose. To disseminate strategy tools logic at graduate level means to have professionals in the next 2 years who have known on that approach. So this is my first key factors, to define in which context to enter to. The second and the last one refer to teacher awareness and knowledge on the strategy tools movement. I think the awareness and the knowledge on the strategy tools are key. Therefore, what actions we can do for that? I think the classical selling approach does not function in this context, especially at graduate level, where teachers, let's say, trust only in academic testimonials. So a value proposition should be developed, and this proposition can leverage on some key points. For example, provide free access to strategy tool online courses for educators, already done by the community. Second, develop a community of educators so as potential teachers can find academic testimonials, good practices, syllabi, for example. 3, point out the opportunity to work with real and updated data, while case studies are freezed. Here there is a living community, so real and updated data. And 4, offer the opportunity to have internship for students or summer weeks for European students or American, leveraging on the community of consultants. It's also a way for recruiting new talents. So that's the point I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Professor Martini. I think it is great to see like the energy and the emotion that comes from you going first to discover the strategy tool and bring them into that part. So there is a lot of comment in the chat that let you go maybe going through. In the meantime, I would ask maybe Javier to let us know how did you fit in with your educational experience with strategy tool, and it similar to Professor Martini or different angle for your experience?
Actually, it's a different journey because when I thought about like getting involved in this field at the beginning, for me was I would say like 2 main objectives. One is that as soon as I found out what the strategy tools was doing, I had the feeling that obviously more people had to know about all this approach. Okay, so that was one. And obviously, education was a field that could cover and spread all this knowledge. But I've never been involved as a professor, for instance. So there was an opportunity, and actually Ray Rasmussen, who is here, mentioned in one of the meetings that we have, yeah, hi Rick, that he was planning to incorporate the simulation into one of their courses that he has in Northeastern. And I just jumped in, and I thought that that was a great opportunity to validate and to experiment how this could actually fit into a current program, and use it as a platform to later on knock on doors in Mexico, in some of the top universities here in Mexico. Okay, and I'm sure we will talk about this later, but getting involved in this field takes a lot of time. And as you mentioned, Enrico, you need to know who is the buyer, who's the decision maker, who's the customer, how can we help teachers, for instance, to like facilitate or make this transition easier, because some of them have several years lecturing these courses using maybe the same material. So change or being changed, as Tony mentioned, is not easy. Okay.
Thank you, Javier, for that. And let's go now to Greg now. So explain us a little bit your angle here, mostly on the corporate training as well, and how this educational angle you can bring in, and how you can link with what we heard from Professor Martini and Javier.
Yeah, so I think that from my perspective, indeed, I'm not engaged into the academic training and education, but more in the learning and development programs in the corporations. And actually, I see this also as a possibility, and we spoke this in the beginning of today's session about the business development, that actually the learning and development programs could be a good entry point to corporate programs with the strategy tools. So, so I think that we can position our simulations as a kind of thought-provoking exercise, but also to help the leaders to deal with the other challenges, which, for example, Tony mentioned today also, that it's important to have the engaging organization, having the common understanding and the strategic thinking capabilities by the middle line managers, not only the top. Also improving the communication skills and also help to people to have the better decision making, and also a discussion on the empowerment and this agile organization. So I think that we can position our programs first as a kind of thought-provoking exercise, and putting everyone on the same, let's say, language level, but also exposing the value of the simulations and also the experience that we provide to the top level managers, that they can see that it's actually opportunity to start the conversation within the organization and to put everyone on the same page. So Professor Martini mentioned today also about the budget. And funny is that it's easier potentially even to tap on the learning and development budgets in the corporations because they have budgets. And then when we demonstrate the value, it's easier then to present the value to the buyer on the commercial side. So that's, from my perspective, I see this as a kind of opportunity to put the feet in the door, and then to spread the word that actually this is a very good program, and also the tools for the corporations.
We have this great audience, so I want to make sure that we get this. So Tony, I put you in the spotlight again because link of what you mentioned before and your experience, that what we did at Duke and before. So how do you see this part? How has it been for you to fit in strategy tools into the Fuqua Business School, and how it's going? And did you kind of see the same kind of insight that what had been shared by Javier, Professor Martini, and Greg?
Yeah, I think I'd echo everything that was said, right? Professor Martini, the point on budget is a challenge, right? Inside an organization as a professor, very, very limited budget, even at a place like Duke, I don't have a budget for the class. However, there is executive education. And so there is that link. I think also the students themselves are going on to get jobs at Rivian or wherever. So in my context, a lot of them go into the high-tech Silicon Valley world, and they'll become advocates for this kind of work. So I think that's key. I think on the part of executive education or corporate education, bringing it into a company, I really see that as a Trojan horse. I mean, I think you bring it in at a certain place, right? And it'll create noise, right? And then people will start to see it. I think it was when we were talking about the accelerator, right? They said they fumbled with the tools. Well, that's what you want. You're fumbling with the tools because the tools are kind of exposing where weaknesses are. And in a way, that's kind of determining where your leadership system might have a blind spot. So it's not just even education, it's perhaps even assessment of, well, where does this leadership system actually need to build capability, right? But you can only do that if more and more people are exposed. And I think the beauty of codifying things to the 100 or so tools that you have is that once you know how to discern and parse the context and which tool to use, then you get the breakthrough. But you have a common mental model and a common mental map there, right? So it's almost the language of strategies being codified into checklists. But it's not checklist manifesto, because I think the other side of where the simulation comes in, and why I think it really adds value is I said in the chat, content is king, but context is the kingdom. Those who are really successful, I feel, as strategists, are the ones that can parse context, simplify it, like Chris did with these 2x2 for that client, so that then everybody kind of has a common mental model of how to move forward. There's a shared perspective in where they're going forward. And so I think it's this balance between codifying the decisions that have to get made and the trade-offs, which is strategy 101, but then knowing which tool to invoke at what time, given where you are on the journey, and maintaining optionality moving forward. And I say this often, and it gets people mad, but how'd you learn how to kiss? Right? I'm not sure any online learning program, it can teach you about, whatever, how to move your tongue clockwise or anti-clockwise or this, that, or the other. And you can teach you, or how'd you learn how to ride a bike? You can learn the physics, but sometimes you got to get on the bike. And I think the simulation is the getting on the bike. I know all the physics, I know all this, but you can't do it till you've done it. And I think one of the difficult things with strategy is you don't get to be in strategy unless you've hung around for 15 years. You know what I mean? You've either worked for a consultancy or you've been inside a firm, and because you're smart enough to navigate the matrix of the firm or deal with the bureaucracy and hierarchy of a consulting firm to become partner, then you get to do strategy in the formulation sense of the word. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because today, in a world that's complex as we're dealing with now, you need a system of decisions that are informed by solid tools and that are guided by a shared sense of purpose. And so what I perceive here, you've built is kind of a new operating system for the enterprise to be able to kind of deal with to live in perpetual beta, to be able to move forward in a more organic fashion. And so I said in the last talk there that accelerators are the new MBAs.
Yeah, that's well. So thank you, Tony. I keep you there as well. Rick, I know that you're there in the audience. If you want to jump in, you let me know, or we let Javier doing the work today for your side. Feel free. I just want to make sure that this is open. For the rest, I want to take one other question. And the question is, now we discuss about positioning, what we do and how to enter this and how to create the link with the buyer or with the faculty and up, let's say. So the second question that we have, how we can create a frictionless system to embed strategy tools on different levels, one canvas, one guest lecture, a simulation, or a large program design, as it is happening in some other case, to make it really, really like lean and easy for the buyer, the faculty, the student, and also the facilitator to build this kind of connection. And here maybe will be extremely interesting to hear the 4 different angles that we have here, because there are any journey is different than what we do in education. and maybe we start on the same idea, but after like we end up kind of tailor-made something specific for the level, the student, the university, and et cetera, et cetera. So let's maybe hear about how you were able to design this embedding of the strategy tool into an education program. Let's take the same order, just for the sake of time, just try to get into a couple of minutes each so we can get this debate going on for that. And I think this has been extremely valid so far. So let's start with Professor Martini.
Okay, please, Enrico, call me Antonella, because
I can call
here I see Javier, Greg, and Tony. So yeah, Professor Martini. Okay, just for my students.
Okay, Antonella.
Okay.
Floor is yours. Apologies.
Thanks. So again, I start with my experience. We made this year. The context is a graduate level annual course, so 120 hours class in engineering faculty with 19 students, grouped in 5 teams with 1 tutor for each team and 5 real project work with the real companies. So students are engaged in collaborative learning and real project-based learning. I used strategy tools in 2 phases of the project work. The first one was the opportunity identification, and the next one was the portfolio map. I mean, explore, exploit. So which tools we used? Well, we used the transformation roadmap, phase number 1. So understanding the landscape. I mean, industry shift map, industry map, scenario, strategy map. The students used tools from strategic foresight to identify driving forces and weak signals. And they used such forces and weak signals to populate the industry shift map. They developed scenarios and narratives, so possible and probable futures. They identify strategic dilemmas in their project, so in real companies, and link dilemmas with scenarios. They analyzed how incumbents were moving. They develop the ecosystem. So we use the ecosystem canvas, and we use, of course, strategy intro. So they used the strategy tools in their projects and presented the results to the company. And we had very good results. Then, after that, we had transform, the simulation. We had the simulation in 2 consecutive half day, 4 hours a day, so 8 hours overall. And the teams were the same. That's an important point. This is highly important because team members had been working, in our cases, for 7 months and knew each other. So they were real teams. So during the simulation, there has been learning at both individual but also team level, also for students. In the following lessons, after the simulation, we worked on the culture map, the as-is map and the to-be culture map, and of course, leadership roadmap. I think in my experience that to have a briefing activity is key. And these briefing activities with students has to be designed. We prepared a questionnaire to fill individually just 4 or 5 days after the simulation, so as to let the adrenaline down. Then to discuss inside each team when working to leadership roadmap and culture map, and then to discuss together, students and teacher, without external person. without Enrico, because it's a private moment of learning for the class, and that's quite important. So what are the key features in our cases? First of all, strategy tools learning to be effective requires real context. It is not possible to teach theoretically. I mean, yes, it is possible, but it is not effective. So students need to put it in action. Therefore, new pedagogical approaches are required. In our experience, project-based learning with team working is an effective approach, especially for STEM faculties. Second point, this is quite important for me. Transform is an experience-based learning whose goal is not just to use some tools. It brings into play soft skills such as leadership, negotiation. Students feel emotions, positive and negative, and teacher should be aware of that. What I mean is transform enables metacognition, which should be cultivated by the teacher. For example, with the design of the debriefing moments. If the teacher is not aware of that and prepared to deal with it, an opportunity has gone. This is an aspect, I think, this is a plus for the simulation, but there is the risk not to get that occasion exploited. So the teacher should be aware of that and should have an active role in the simulation.
Thank you. I think it's clear. So now I put the chat for everybody to keep away, say, in terms of project. Say how it is important from everybody experience and how much time you say. But I want also maybe to hear now from Javier, what do you see in terms of how you and Rick, in this case, have been working to fit in a strategy tool for what to do, and maybe how you're doing outside of the Northeastern part?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about this notion of how can we make this transition more like frictionless. And I'd like to talk about this on the perspective of the teacher and maybe the perspective of the buyers. Okay. When I think about the perspective of the teacher, I think that it would be extremely nice maybe having a vanilla course deck for the basic topics that we think that it could be included in either an undergraduate program or maybe into executive education, okay? So anybody that is interested in like jumping in or using the approach of the strategy tools can have a basic material, okay? A starting point and not having to think, okay, how do I completely redesign the material that I need for using this approach, okay? So I think that would really help. And the other part would be like maybe building a few, or I would say maybe at this stage, collecting some of the industry cases that we already have, okay? Because some of us have been working on, I don't know, in the mobility space, maybe others in like in general, technological context. So I know that there are several pieces. So maybe if we are able to collect and make 2 or 3 cases at this stage, that would really help a lot, okay? Because all of us know that have a lot of content for, I don't know, maybe talking a specific technology or a segment in the industry, and we have some articles or videos that really can complement some of the, I would say, more traditional business cases from Harvard or any of the other schools. And I think that that really would help for the teachers. And then when we consider how can we make this easier for the decision makers, I know there's a first version on the commercial terms on, okay, how can we make this happen, okay? Because at the end of the day, I mean, if we want to make this like a massive with any business school. At some point, there's a question, okay, how much does it cost? Okay, what do we need? Okay, and how can we make this transition? And on this transition, we also know that we can, as the strategy tool community, we can help them or accompany them in this transition, okay? But I would think those are like 2 points that could help this transition to be like more easy for both of these customers, okay? You're muted.
I'm muted. I want to take a spin on this one, Greg. So let's take this idea of the strategy tool and this idea of project-based and context-based. On your experience, you're working mostly with corporate client and this part. How is working? Can we use the own company in the simulation or in the strategy tool as the project? Or do the people want to take a different point of view, an external point of view, to avoid to bring in kind of what is their daily life? What is your experience on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it depends. That's the answer of the consultant. Depends on what the real problems are addressed through the engagement. So in case, for example, when I run my WarGaming, it's absolutely on the business, yeah, because we want to reveal the blind spots in the organization and in the strategy. And that's why we have to focus on the real facts and business and analyzing the situation. But when it comes to this, let's say, transformation in the way how the organization works on the strategy, I think that it's better to work on, let's say, different industry. Like we did, for example, last year for the bank here in Poland, we used the energy industry as a business case because we didn't want them to speak up about banking. Obviously, we would be so tiny, and they would be big, and the ego would be higher. We rather wanted to focus them on the processes and also on the experience. And still they could see the value from working on the energy sector, because actually they are, as a corporate bank, they were also involved in the investment in the energy projects. So they could see the value because they could see what happens on the side of the customers of that bank. But I think it's better to play in the fictional, let's say, environment and let them go through the experiences. So as I said, that's all depends. And maybe coming to this question on how to transition to the project and also engagement. I think it's very important when we talk to corporates, know your customer very well. So do the due diligence and understand quite a lot what's going on around, because then you can ask the right questions. And the second is, when you start the engagement, ask the questions. And then you can listen and hear some, let's say, sentences that are critical to pinpoint and then tap on them. So for example, we want to break the silos. So maybe opposite to what Antonella said, then let's say when we design the projects, we say, let's set up the teams which are cross-functional, because then the people can bring their experiences from different functions, and then we can learn from each other. So the finance people can learn from marketing, marketing people can learn from sales, and they bring up their own experiences on the team. So that's one example. Or for example, we want people to think business. We want to improve the business acumen. Then obviously we will say, yeah, absolutely, going through the experience of the simulation, you will know a lot how the C-suite works. And it's like how holistically you have to look into the business. And funny is sometimes like the top management is saying, well, we know how industry works, but we want our people to better understand. And sometimes I think in my head, but I don't want to say that, if you say like, we know how industry works, you will find out that you don't know. And then, you know, I think it's a good opportunity also for the top management to reveal these blind spots and to find out that actually they don't know too much. And Tony mentioned in comments that actually indeed the guys who are brought from the middle line, sometimes even from the bottom of the, let's say, the frontliners, can bring a lot of knowledge from the market. And having the everyone in the same room brings a lot of new stories from the market, and it's like also thought-provoking, not only for the people who are, let's say, the trainees, but also this funders, also the sponsors of the project could hear a lot of good news stories.
Thank you, good. You're a bit cutting out on the final, but like we got it 99% done, and I think it's great, great bridge that you're giving there. So, Tony, on your side, you mentioned you use mobility, and also when you present the book first, you also present the canvas, but that is straight to the heart of the board of the executive team. So, how are you? What are the difference between the educational area and the most the executive or the consulting part?
Yeah, I kind of think there's three different contexts, right? There's the academic context where students are in a degreed program. That comes with a whole bunch of overhead, like in our world, AACSB accreditation. So when I want to change the curriculum, pretty much the same as Antonella was talking about, I still have to be able to show how are you going to get your objectives and what are the objectives. You know, there's a whole bunch of kind of academic wiring that you have to do to kind of say, even if you're moving from a theoretical foundation to a practical foundation, you still have all that back-end engineering to do in terms of just keeping the certifiers happy. So the challenge there, I think, is establishing a beachhead with faculty like the ones here who are willing to do that and kind of take a chance. If I'm being completely honest, from my perspective, that's more rare than it is common, because I can just dust off my transparencies from last time and talk about Porter's 5 forces, and I've already got the test, and you know, I'd rather be at the beach kind of thing. And so first of all, I think in the educational context, you're going to have to kind of uncover the innovators, like the group of people here, because there's overhead that's arguably not value added, but it is important to the institution. And in the accredited theoretical MBA, MEM, whatever kind of degree granting context, it's important to understand that those of us who are here had some overhead to either convince our department head or get through a curriculum committee, that kind of stuff. And it's just a necessary evil. So there's two difficulties there, is finding, you know, someone who's willing to do that overhead. And the second is, even if they are, they don't really have budget. I have played a little bit. One of the good things about organizations, and Chris will see what we can do on the engineering side, I've been successful on the MBA side, is there's still a textbook budget, but nobody uses textbook anymore. So I'm like, okay, well, if you spend $150 on a textbook, could we do $150 for the experience? And I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's something, you know, but that's the challenge on the education piece. The second part is what I'll call executive education. So this is non-degree granting at a place like Pisa or Duke or IE, right? What that essentially is people who want to come back for a refresher, right? And so when we run an advanced management program or something like that, largely it's alum, and largely it's cross-industry. So again, the point here is run the sim, energy or mobility or whatever, because what you want to do there is just for them to understand the holistic context within which these tools get applied, right? And if you do any one industry, then all the insurance people will, well, that's not how it really works. Let me tell you how it works. And that's not what you want. You're not trying to become an expert in the industry. You're trying to understand the synthetic of how these different tools kind of line up so that you can find a path to profitability. So I think that's a good place. And the other thing is, if you can attract, you know, in our world, we like to, you know, I think our break even's 24 or so. If you can get 24 in, it's a 3-day class. You share the spoils, that kind of thing. But then you're exposing it to maybe 5 different industries. Maybe each company will send 3 or 4 people. And then you get to the third part, which is now they think they understand the industry, but they don't, because if they say industry, they don't understand that we're in an ecosystem world, not an industry world. So that's their first problem. Then they start saying, well, could we do this for us. I've seen the value of the synthetic. I've seen the value of how the tools integrate with the context. I now understand how I develop discernment just learning about mobility or energy. Can we take this inside the firm? Then the question becomes, where do you take it inside the firm? Right? Do you go straight up to the executive halls and have them do it? Or because at the end of the day, I think if most people in the organization don't understand and think this way, the likelihood that the organization will survive is lower. Right? So then the question is, what's the best beachhead where you'll get the most diffusion in the shortest amount of time for this stuff? And that's where I come down to thinking, like, I've done it at the higher level and I've done it like middle out. And I kind of feel that middle out has actually more spread coefficient, has more network reach. But then you have to be smart about who you pick to do it. And that's where you can use ONA, organization network analysis, to kind of figure out who are the real change agents in the organization, bring them in, and then you'll get the diffusion that you want. So I think there's 3 different markets, if you want to call it that are motivated in 3 different ways. But I think that you can stair step them. But there's different criteria in each one to kind of get to critical mass. Does that make sense, Enrico?
It does. It does. So I'm really, really sorry because this has been cut short by 50 minutes, and this has been pretty amazing chat. I just want to take the last question, and I don't think we're going to have the run on this, but like our good friend Jacopo in the chat, and say like, university have also alliance among themselves. So how we can use and replicate what we learn on the different part of the world when we run this educational part, and kind of aggregate them on an overall view. Just take here, whoever want to step up in this.
I would say let's find the rebels, because those are the ones that might be willing to try this. And I could also just share some ideas. What about creating an international competition between business schools? Okay, that might be interesting, because we've seen the power when students go through this. Okay, but that's in a local, in a university. But what about we extend this? And the other one, for instance, in Latin America, L&D departments inside organizations really like programs that have the brand of international universities. So that could be interesting as well. Okay, so find out some universities that might be willing to launch an experiment with us, having their brand. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
That's really a good idea, Javier. If I may, another, in addition to this international competition, maybe we can study the usage of micro-credentials. Because micro-credential is a certification of assessed learning associated with a specific and relevant skill or competencies. So universities have been developing this micro-credential, and maybe it is what to study this this aspect.
That's good idea. Thanks, Antonella, for that. Look, what we're going to do is I want to make sure that this group of people working on education has somehow a way to continue to interact, because we're hearing a lot of stuff that we would like to. So what I propose here on strategy tool side is to make sure that we can maybe validate with you that maybe we can create a kind of a sharing part, I don't know, in the hub that we have, that we can continue to discuss education, that we continue to share what we do in the different parts of the world on the different layers, because this has been a great discussion and cannot be 1 hour in a panel every 6 months for what we do. So again, thanks Antonella, thanks Javier, thanks Greg, thanks Tony for the sharing with us your experience. Thanks for all the audience that has been with us. We're gonna now switch to the next panel. So I will put in the chat the main landing page where you can have the possibility to choose what is the next track. There are 2 options now. One is corporate transformation, would be moderated by Glenn Tion from Panama. And the other one is a cluster that will be moderated by Roberto Javier from Costa Rica. So we're going to take a couple of minutes here to start on the other side. Again, thanks. This has been great. I took a ton of notes and I'm looking forward to replicate this on a shorter basis with you all.